Have you ever wondered why some of the brightest minds in history preferred solitude over constant company? Einstein, who revolutionized physics, often sailed alone in his small boat to think. Newton developed calculus during a period of isolation forced by the plague. Schopenhauer once wrote that solitude is the fate of all exceptional minds, a statement that echoes through the ages and still resonates in our hearts today. In those moments when you'd rather pick up a book than attend a party, or take a solitary walk instead of hitting a crowded happy hour, perhaps you're experiencing the same phenomenon that so many geniuses before you have felt. Today, let's dive into the depths of this inconvenient truth about intelligent people and explore how to navigate this solitary path in a world that rarely understands it. One thing I'd like to mention: I don't consider myself intelligent, far from it. But I have to admit that I often prefer being alone with my thoughts rather than in the company of others. Over the course of my life, I've truly come to realize the immeasurable value of solitude, especially when I need to think and act on a particular matter. I'm not referring to social isolation, as human connection is undoubtedly necessary. Rather, I'm talking about the kind of isolation that allows you to reflect and wrestle with your inner battles. But enough of this talk. Let's get to the heart of the matter and understand it from the perspective of those who truly know what they're talking about. I hope you enjoy this. The correlation between high intelligence and a preference for solitude isn't just a cultural stereotype. It's a phenomenon documented in various psychological studies. A 2016 study published in the British Journal of Psychology found that people with higher IQs reported lower levels of life satisfaction when they spent more time socializing. Arthur Schopenhauer, in his work Parerga and Paralipomena, wrote extensively about how superior minds naturally seek isolation, not out of misanthropy, but out of intellectual necessity. He argued that a genius finds within themselves an inexhaustible source of thoughts, and doesn't require the external stimulation that most people desperately seek. This tendency towards solitude is vividly illustrated in the life of Nikola Tesla, who regularly worked 18-hour days in near total isolation. His contemporaries often found him absorbed in his laboratories, in the middle of the night, lost in experiments and calculations that would eventually bring alternating current to the world. This wasn't a loneliness born of sadness, but of purpose. As Tesla himself wrote, being alone is the condition necessary to do something meaningful. This organic need of the advanced intellect is reflected in contemporary research, suggesting that individuals with higher IQs show greater satisfaction with solitary activities and less need for social validation. The paradox of social intelligence also deserves our attention. While some intelligent people may appear socially awkward, what often happens is a deliberate disinterest in social conventions they find trivial. Albert Einstein perfectly exemplifies this phenomenon. Frequently described as distracted and socially clumsy, yet capable of profound empathy and connection when the subject genuinely interested him. As Kant observed, there's a fundamental difference between not knowing the rules of the social game and consciously choosing not to play it. The superior intellect often opts for the latter, preferring deep conversations with a few over superficial interactions with many. The theory of hyperstimulation offers a fascinating neurological explanation. A 2018 study from the University of Chicago demonstrated that people with higher cognitive capacity process information at greater speed and depth, making common social environments feel like an overwhelming sensory bombardment. This explains why Isaac Newton, after completing his Principia Mathematica during a period of isolation, wrote that if I have made valuable discoveries, it has been more due to patience and attention than to any other talent. Isolation allowed Newton to control the flow of stimuli and organize his revolutionary thoughts without the constant distraction of social demands. Plato's writings remind us that those who ascend from the cave to contemplate true reality often feel out of place when they return to the world of shadows. Similarly, highly intelligent people frequently experience what psychologists call existential alienation. a sense of being fundamentally disconnected from the concerns and interests that animate most people. Emily Dickinson, whose poetic genius was misunderstood in her time, chose near-total isolation, rarely leaving her home in Amherst. This created an inevitable barrier of experience that intensified her desire for solitude, but also produced some of the most profound poetry in American literature. Stoic wisdom, particularly in the teachings of Seneca, echoes this sentiment. Being alone with oneself wasn't seen as a burden, but as an opportunity to develop self-sufficiency, a virtue that intelligent people naturally cultivate. This perspective finds surprising parallels in the African philosophy of Ubuntu, though with a crucial difference. While Ubuntu celebrates interconnectedness, I am because we are, it also recognizes the value of personal autonomy within the community. The ability to enjoy one's own company is often misinterpreted as arrogance, when in reality, it represents an advanced form of emotional and intellectual autonomy that Aristotle might consider an expression of eudaimonia. One rarely discussed aspect is how high intelligence alters the perception of time. Csikszentmihalyi, in his studies on the state of flow, observed that people with greater cognitive capacity often experience temporal distortion during intellectually stimulating activities. Virginia Woolf, whose literary genius is indisputable, wrote extensively about her moments of being, periods of intense creative clarity that required absolute isolation. Hours would pass like minutes during these periods of deep concentration, making conventional social interactions feel painfully slow and predictable by comparison. However, it's important to acknowledge the notable exceptions to the trend of isolation among highly intelligent individuals. Richard Feynman, a Nobel Prize-winning physicist, known for his contributions to quantum electrodynamics, was famous for his exuberant and social personality. He played bongos in bars, enjoyed parties, and cultivated a wide social network. Similarly, mathematician Emmy Noether, despite her groundbreaking genius in abstract algebra, was known for her enthusiasm for collaborative work and her joy in lively discussions with colleagues. These examples remind us that intelligence manifests in diverse ways, and that the need for solitude, while common, is not universal among exceptional minds. In Eastern traditions, particularly Taoism, we find fascinating parallels. Lao Tzu valued retreat and simplicity as pathways to wisdom. "The wise man is often solitary," he wrote, "not as a lament, but as an acknowledgement of a natural truth." Similarly, Tibetan Buddhist tradition holds prolonged meditation retreats as essential tools for higher mental development. Milarepa, the renowned Tibetan yogi, spent decades in isolation in Himalayan caves, declaring that solitude is the laboratory where true wisdom is tested. This perspective offers a counterpoint to the Western view, which often pathologizes the desire for solitude, labeling it as antisocial when, in reality, it frequently represents a higher form of self-awareness. The phenomenon of loneliness in a crowd is particularly acute for intelligent individuals. Franz Kafka, whose literary genius was only widely recognized after his death, wrote in his diaries about the constant feeling of being a foreigner, even among close friends. Carl Jung described this as the peculiar feeling of alienation amidst human society, where one may be physically present, but experiences a profound psychological chasm separating them from others. A 2020 study from Harvard University revealed that 79% of individuals with IQs above 130 reported feeling fundamentally different, even in social groups where they shared common interests. In the works of Friedrich Nietzsche, especially Thus Spoke Zarathustra, we find a celebration of the individual who withdraws from the public square to cultivate higher thoughts. "Go to your solitude with your love and with your creation," Nietzsche advised, understanding that great ideas rarely emerge amidst the noise of social consensus, but rather in the contemplative silence that only solitude can provide. This preference for creative isolation is dramatically illustrated in the biography of Marcel Proust, who lined his room with cork to block out external noise, and worked almost exclusively at night to avoid interruptions while writing his masterpiece, In Search of Lost Time. The correlation between exceptional creativity and a preference for solitude cannot be overlooked. A 2021 study conducted by Stanford University revealed that 72% of participants with significant creative achievements reported needing long periods of isolation for their work. Marie Curie, a two-time Nobel Prize winner, was known for her preference for long, solitary hours in her laboratory. Moments of revolutionary insight rarely occur during collective brainstorming sessions, but rather during periods of solitary contemplation, when the mind can forge unprecedented connections between seemingly unrelated ideas. Precisely the kind of thinking that highly intelligent individuals tend to favor and cultivate. Interestingly, the need for solitude in intelligent people does not imply an inability to form deep connections. On the contrary, following the thoughts of Carl Rogers, these individuals often develop interpersonal relationships of extraordinary depth and authenticity, albeit in smaller numbers. Poet Emily Dickinson maintained profound correspondences with a select few friends, revealing in these letters an intellectual and emotional intimacy rarely achieved in everyday interactions. It's the quality, not the quantity, that matters, a fundamental distinction that extroverted societies like the United States often fail to fully appreciate. The social stigma associated with a preference for solitude presents significant challenges in cultures that prioritize extroversion. A 2019 study published in the Journal of Personality and Social Psychology found that people who prefer solitude are often perceived as less capable, less friendly, and less attractive as professional partners, even when their objective achievements suggest otherwise. This bias against introversion can be particularly damaging in corporate and educational environments that prioritize teamwork and constant vocal participation. As Susan Cain observed in her book Quiet, there's a difference between loneliness and solitude. The former is a state of lack, the latter is a state of fullness. There's also an evolutionary dimension to consider. Anthropologists suggest that individuals with exceptional cognitive abilities may have played specialized roles in early societies, such as shamans or inventors, that required periods of isolation for contemplation and experimentation. In Native American traditions, the vision quest, a deliberate period of solitude in nature, was considered essential for gaining wisdom. This behavioral pattern may have been positively selected, suggesting that the correlation between intelligence and a preference for solitude has deep roots in our evolutionary history. For those who recognize this need for solitude within themselves, but struggle with contemporary social expectations, there are practical strategies to help find balance. Harvard psychology professor Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi recommends creating temporary bubbles of isolation. 2 to 3 hours of uninterrupted time, regularly scheduled into your routine. Tech philosopher Cal Newport advocates for the practice of deep work, where electronic devices are turned off and communication is paused, to allow for complete immersion in thought. Setting clear boundaries with friends and family about your need for alone time, without apologizing for it, is also crucial. As poet Mary Oliver wrote, "I don't need to be right. I just need to be gently firm." Finally, we must acknowledge that the relationship between intelligence and solitude is bidirectional. While intelligence may predispose someone to prefer solitude, time spent in solitary contemplation also cultivates certain forms of intelligence. Charles Darwin developed his theory of evolution during long solitary walks on his estate, deliberately avoiding social distractions as he organized his revolutionary ideas. As Montaigne observed, the most fruitful and natural exercise of our minds is conversation with oneself. An internal dialogue that simultaneously reflects and develops intellectual capacity, creating a virtuous cycle that explains why so many historical geniuses zealously guarded their alone time. If you found yourself resonating with this exploration of the connection between intelligence and solitude, know that you are not alone in your solitude. As Tesla once said, the man who keeps to himself stimulates his mind, and that is freedom. Share this video with someone special who also values moments of introspection. Perhaps it could spark one of those rare and profound connections we've discussed. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more philosophical dives into the human mind. Your comments are especially valuable. I'm curious to hear how you balance your need for solitude with the social demands of the modern world. Have you developed your own techniques that might benefit other viewers? Remember, your engagement not only supports this channel, but also helps build a community of thoughtful minds, united in our shared appreciation for the power of solitude.